The silence in the boardroom was deafening as I watched my brother Marcus's face drain of all color. His expensive fountain pen clattered to the mahogany table as he stared at the acquisition documents spread before him, his eyes scanning the signature line where my name appeared in bold black ink as the new majority owner of Harrison and Associates Marketing. The same company where he had climbed the corporate ladder for 8 years. The same office where he had mocked my entrepreneurial dreams just 18 months ago, calling my business venture a cute little hobby that would never amount to anything real. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The look of absolute shock on Marcus's face as he realized that his little sister Sofia had just become his boss was worth every sleepless night, every rejected loan application, and every condescending comment he had made about my capabilities. But to understand how we got to this moment, I need to take you back to where it all began. In the cramped garage of our childhood home in Sacramento, California, where my dreams of building something meaningful were born amid the scent of motor oil and the sound of my father's disappointed sighs. I'm Sofia Chen, and at 26 years old, I had always been the family disappointment, at least according to the carefully constructed narrative that my older brother Marcus had spent years perfecting. While he sailed through Stanford Business School on a full academic scholarship and landed a prestigious position at Harrison and Associates straight out of college, I struggled through community college, bounced between part-time jobs, and seemed to lack the natural business acumen that everyone assumed ran in our family's DNA. Our parents, both successful accountants who had built their own firm from nothing, never said it directly, but I could see the comparison in their eyes every time Marcus achieved another milestone, while I remained stuck in what felt like perpetual mediocrity. The truth was that I had never fit into the traditional mold that my family expected. While Marcus thrived in corporate environments with their structured hierarchies and predictable advancement paths, I felt suffocated by the same systems that energized him. I was creative, intuitive, and drawn to solving problems through innovation rather than following established protocols. These qualities, which would later become my greatest strengths, were viewed as weaknesses in a family that valued conventional success above all else. My entrepreneurial journey began almost by accident in the summer of 2022, when I was working as a social media coordinator for a small nonprofit organization dedicated to helping women escape domestic violence situations. The pay was terrible, barely covering my rent for a studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood, but the work felt meaningful in ways that my previous jobs never had. I was responsible for creating content that would reach women in crisis, designing graphics that communicated safety and hope, and managing online communities where survivors could find support and resources. The breakthrough moment came during a particularly challenging campaign where we needed to create content that would be engaging enough to reach women in abusive relationships without alerting their abusers to their information-seeking behavior. Traditional marketing approaches felt tone-deaf and potentially dangerous, so I began experimenting with subtle visual cues, carefully crafted messaging, and strategic placement that could communicate vital information while appearing innocent to casual observers. The campaign's success was remarkable. Our reach increased by 300%, calls to the crisis hotline doubled, and most importantly, the feedback from survivors indicated that our content had literally saved lives by providing them with information and resources they hadn't known existed. But what struck me most was how the techniques I had developed for this specific challenge could be applied to other marketing situations where audiences needed to be reached carefully and authentically. I started noticing patterns in how different demographics responded to various types of content, how timing and platform selection could dramatically impact engagement, and how authenticity and genuine connection mattered more than polished production values in building trust with audiences. These insights felt revolutionary to me, but when I tried to share them with the marketing professionals in my network, including Marcus, they dismissed my observations as anecdotal or too specialized to have broader applications. Marcus's reaction was particularly crushing. I had invited him to lunch at his favorite downtown restaurant, hoping to get his perspective on some ideas I had been developing about trauma-informed marketing and authentic audience engagement. I presented my concepts with genuine excitement, sharing case studies and metrics that demonstrated the effectiveness of my approaches. But instead of the constructive feedback I had hoped for, Marcus looked at me with the patronizing smile I had come to dread. "Sophia, what you're describing isn't revolutionary marketing," he said, cutting his steak with precise movements that somehow felt dismissive. "It's just basic empathy applied to content creation. Any competent marketing professional already understands these principles. You're acting like you've discovered something new when you've just stumbled onto entry-level concepts that we use every day in real marketing." The word stung, but what hurt more was the casual way he dismissed months of research and experimentation, as if my work was inherently less valuable because it hadn't emerged from a corporate environment or traditional marketing education. He went on to explain how real marketing required sophisticated analytics, substantial budgets, and strategic frameworks that could only be developed through proper business training and corporate experience. "I appreciate that you're passionate about your little nonprofit work," Marcus continued, "but you need to understand the difference between amateur content creation and professional marketing. If you're serious about building a career in this field, you should consider going back to school for an MBA, or at least getting some entry-level experience at a legitimate agency." The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, with Marcus offering what he clearly viewed as helpful career advice, while systematically demolishing my confidence in every insight I had gained through hands-on experience. By the time we parted ways, I felt smaller and more uncertain than I had in years, questioning whether my observations about marketing and audience engagement had any real value, or if I was just deluding myself about my capability. But that night, alone in my apartment with my laptop and a growing sense of defiant determination, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of accepting Marcus's assessment of my abilities, I would prove him wrong by building something that demonstrated the value of my approach to marketing. I would create a business that succeeded precisely because it rejected the conventional wisdom that Marcus and his colleagues took for granted. The idea for authentic reach marketing came to me during a sleepless night, spent researching successful marketing campaigns that had broken traditional rules. I discovered story after story of brands that had succeeded by prioritizing genuine connection over polished presentation, by understanding their audiences on emotional rather than just demographic levels, and by taking risks that established agencies would never approve. These brands had found success by doing exactly what I had been doing at the nonprofit, creating content that spoke to people's real experiences and genuine needs, rather than trying to manipulate them into purchases through sophisticated psychological technique. My business concept was simple but radical in its execution. Instead of offering traditional marketing services focused on driving immediate sales and maximizing return on advertising spend, I would help small businesses and nonprofit organizations build authentic relationships with their audiences through trauma-informed, empathy-driven marketing strategy. I would specialize in working with clients who served vulnerable populations or who wanted to communicate with audiences that traditional marketing often alienated or overlooked. The services I planned to offer included authentic storytelling consultation, where I would help businesses identify and share their genuine mission and values in ways that resonated with their ideal customer. I would provide trauma-informed content creation, ensuring that marketing materials were sensitive to the experiences of audience members who might have experienced various forms of trauma or marginalization. Most importantly, I would offer community-building strategies that prioritized long-term relationship development over short-term conversion optimization. Starting the business required every penny of my savings, which amounted to less than $3,000 after years of living paycheck to paycheck. I couldn't afford an office, professional equipment, or even basic marketing materials, so I set up shop in the garage of my parents' house, surrounded by storage boxes and my father's woodworking tools. The space was far from ideal, with poor lighting, inconsistent internet connectivity, and the constant background noise of suburban life, but it was free and it was mine. My parents' reaction to my business venture was a mixture of concern and barely concealed skepticism. They had spent decades building their accounting firm through careful planning, conservative financial management, and gradual expansion based on proven business models. The idea of their daughter starting a marketing consultancy with no formal training, minimal capital, and what they viewed as an unproven business concept. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Seemed reckless and potentially catastrophic for my already uncertain financial situation. "Honey, we just want you to be realistic about your prospects," my mother said during one of our increasingly tense family dinners. "Marketing is an incredibly competitive field, and you're going up against agencies with decades of experience, established client relationships, and resources you simply don't have. Maybe you should consider this as a side project while you look for a stable job with benefits and growth potential." My father was more direct in his concerns. "Sophia, I've seen too many people chase entrepreneurial dreams without adequate preparation or capital, and it rarely ends well. The failure rate for new businesses is astronomical, especially in service industries where success depends on reputation and professional networks that take years to develop. You don't have the safety net to survive a failed business venture." But the most painful feedback came from Marcus, who visited the house one afternoon while I was working in the garage, setting up what would become my first official office space. He stood in the doorway, surveying my makeshift workspace with an expression that mixed amusement with genuine pity. My office consisted of a folding table borrowed from our parents' basement, a second-hand office chair I had found on Craigslist, and a desktop computer that was already several years old when I purchased it, used from a local electronics store. "This is your big business venture?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying the same tone he had used when we were children and he would discover me playing elaborate make-believe games in the backyard. "Sophia, I know you're passionate about this, but you need to understand what you're up against. Real marketing agencies have teams of specialists, sophisticated software platforms, established relationships with media outlets, and budgets that exceed your entire net worth." He walked around my small workspace, examining the printed articles I had taped to the wall for inspiration, the notebook where I was sketching logo ideas, and the stack of library books about entrepreneurship and small business management that represented my attempt at formal business education. Everything about his body language suggested that he was documenting evidence of my inevitable failure. "Look, I admire your determination," Marcus continued. "But this isn't how successful businesses are built. You need proper funding, professional development, strategic partnerships, and most importantly, you need experience in the industry you're trying to enter. You can't just decide to become a marketing consultant because you had some success with social media at a nonprofit." The conversation that followed was one of the most discouraging experiences of my life. Marcus methodically explained all the ways my business was likely to fail, from my lack of formal credentials to my inadequate understanding of industry standards and practice. He described the sophisticated client acquisition strategies that established agencies used, the complex project management systems required for handling multiple accounts, and the financial planning necessary to survive the irregular income streams that characterized consulting work. "I'm not trying to crush your dreams," Marcus said as he prepared to leave, "but someone needs to give you a realistic perspective on what you're attempting. This garage startup fantasy might make you feel entrepreneurial, but it's not sustainable. Real businesses require real investment, real expertise, and real planning. Maybe you should consider getting some actual experience in the industry before trying to compete with professionals who have dedicated their careers to mastering these skills." After he left, I sat alone in the garage, surrounded by the humble beginnings of what I hoped would become something meaningful, feeling smaller and more uncertain than I had since those initial conversations about my career prospects. Marcus's words echoed in my mind, challenging every assumption I had made about my abilities and my chances for success. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was deluding myself about my potential. Maybe this was just another example of my tendency to dream bigger than my capabilities could support. But as the days passed, and I continued working on developing my business plan, reaching out to potential clients, and refining my service offerings, I began to realize that Marcus's criticism revealed more about his limitations than mine. His vision of business success was entirely defined by traditional metrics and conventional approaches. He couldn't conceive of a marketing agency that succeeded by rejecting the very principles that his corporate environment took for granted. More importantly, I was already seeing evidence that my approach had real value. The nonprofit where I worked had continued using the strategies I developed, and their success had attracted attention from other organizations facing similar challenges. I had received several informal inquiries about consulting work from small businesses whose owners had heard about our campaign results and wanted to explore whether similar approaches could work for their industries. My first official client came through an unexpected connection. Maria Gonzalez owned a small bakery in downtown Sacramento that specialized in traditional Mexican pastries and custom celebration cakes. She had been struggling to compete with larger commercial bakeries and chain stores, despite offering superior quality and personalized service. Her previous marketing efforts had focused on traditional advertising approaches that emphasized price comparisons and convenience factors. But these campaigns had failed to capture what made her bakery special. Maria contacted me after hearing about my work from a mutual friend at the nonprofit, explaining that she needed help reaching customers who would appreciate the cultural authenticity and artisanal quality of her products, rather than just seeking the cheapest available option. She had a limited budget for marketing, having already spent most of her advertising funds on unsuccessful newspaper ads and radio sponsorships that had generated minimal response. Our initial consultation took place in her bakery early on a Tuesday morning, before the day's customers arrived. As Maria showed me around her kitchen, describing the traditional techniques she used and the family recipes that had been passed down through generations, I realized that her previous marketing had completely failed to communicate what made her business unique and valuable. Instead of focusing on price or convenience, I suggested that we build a marketing strategy around storytelling, community connection, and cultural celebration. We would create content that showed Maria's expertise and passion, that educated customers about the traditions behind her products, and that positioned her bakery as a gathering place for people who valued authenticity and craftsmanship over mass production. The campaign we developed included a series of short videos showing Maria preparing traditional pastries, each one explaining the cultural significance and family history behind different recipes. We created social media content that celebrated customer milestones and community events, positioning the bakery as an integral part of people's most important moments. Most importantly, we developed partnerships with local cultural organizations and schools, creating opportunities for Maria to share her expertise while building genuine relationships within the community. The results exceeded both of our expectations. Within 3 months, Maria's revenue had increased by 40%, but more importantly, she had built a loyal customer base that understood and valued what made her business special. Customers began bringing their friends and family members to experience the bakery, writing online reviews that emphasized the personal connection and cultural authenticity, rather than just price and convenience. Maria became known throughout the community as an expert in traditional Mexican baking, leading to catering opportunities and custom cake orders that commanded premium prices. The success of Maria's campaign provided me with the proof of concept I needed to approach other potential clients with confidence. Word spread through Sacramento's small business community about the young marketing consultant who had helped a struggling bakery transform into a thriving community institution. I began receiving inquiries from other business owners who were tired of traditional marketing approaches that made them feel like they were manipulating customers rather than building genuine relationships. My second major client was David Park, who owned a small auto repair shop that specialized in hybrid and electric vehicle maintenance. Like Maria, David was struggling to compete with larger chain operations and dealership service departments, despite offering superior expertise and personalized customer service. His previous marketing had focused on price comparisons and quick turnaround times, but these messages weren't resonating with environmentally conscious consumers who needed specialized knowledge for their vehicle. Working with David, I developed a campaign that positioned him as an environmental ally and technical expert rather than just another mechanic competing on price. We created educational content about electric vehicle maintenance, hosted community workshops about sustainable transportation, and partnered with environmental organizations to reach customers who shared David's commitment to reducing automotive environmental impact. The transformation was remarkable. David's customer base shifted from price-sensitive consumers seeking quick fixes to environmentally conscious vehicle owners who valued his expertise and shared his environmental value. His average transaction value increased by 60%, and customer retention rates improved dramatically as people developed trust in his specialized knowledge and commitment to their values. By the end of my first year in business, I had worked with 12 clients across various industries, from a yoga studio seeking to build authentic wellness community to a financial advisor who wanted to serve first-generation college students without exploiting their inexperience with money management. Each project reinforced my conviction that traditional marketing often failed because it treated customers as targets to be manipulated rather than people to be understood. And the financial success was gratifying but secondary to the personal satisfaction I felt in helping small business owners build sustainable enterprises based on genuine value creation rather than sophisticated manipulation techniques. My revenue had grown steadily throughout the year, allowing me to upgrade my equipment, invest in professional development, and even hire a part-time assistant to help with administrative tasks. But perhaps more importantly, I was building a reputation within Sacramento's business community as someone who could help companies succeed by being more authentic and community-focused rather than more aggressive and sales-oriented. This reputation was attracting clients who had been frustrated with traditional marketing approaches and were seeking alternatives that aligned with their personal values and business philosophy. The contrast between my growing success and Marcus's continued skepticism became increasingly apparent during our family gatherings. While I was excited to share stories about client successes and business growth, Marcus remained convinced that my achievements were temporary and unsustainable. He attributed my success to luck, timing, and the novelty of my approach, rather than any fundamental business acumen or marketing expertise. "You've had some beginner's luck with a few small clients," Marcus told me during Thanksgiving dinner, "but real business growth requires scalable systems, professional infrastructure, and strategic planning that goes beyond feel-good marketing tactics. You're going to hit a ceiling soon when you realize that emotional connection doesn't replace business fundamentals." His attitude was particularly frustrating because he refused to acknowledge the measurable results I was achieving for clients or the sustainable business model I was developing. In his mind, success in marketing could only be achieved through the corporate approaches he had learned at Stanford and implemented at Harrison and Associates. Any alternative path was necessarily inferior and unsustainable. But I was learning that Marcus's perspective, while common in corporate environments, was increasingly disconnected from the realities of how modern consumers made purchasing decisions. The traditional marketing techniques that had dominated for decades were becoming less effective as people became more skeptical of obvious advertising and more responsive to authentic communication and community connection. My approach to marketing wasn't revolutionary in the sense of using completely new techniques, but it was radical in its rejection of manipulation-based strategies in favor of relationship-building approaches that created genuine value for both businesses and customers. This philosophy was resonating with small business owners who had been frustrated with traditional marketing approaches and were seeking alternatives that aligned with their personal values. As my second year in business began, I started receiving inquiries from larger organizations and businesses outside the Sacramento area. My reputation was spreading through word-of-mouth referrals and online testimonials from satisfied clients. I was being invited to speak at small business conferences and marketing workshops, sharing my insights about authentic audience engagement and trauma-informed marketing practice. The garage that had once seemed like evidence of my amateur status was beginning to feel cramped and unprofessional as my business grew. I started researching office spaces and considering the possibility of hiring additional team members to handle the increasing demand for my service. These were the kinds of problems I had dreamed of having when I first started the business, but they also represented challenges that required me to develop new skills and systems. Marcus's prediction about hitting a ceiling seemed premature as I continued to find new opportunities for growth and expansion. But I also recognized that scaling my business would require me to develop exactly the kinds of professional infrastructure and strategic planning capabilities that he had insisted were necessary for sustainable success. The question was whether I could implement these business fundamentals while maintaining the authentic relationship-focused approach that had differentiated my work from traditional marketing agencies. The answer to that question would come sooner than I expected, through an opportunity that would test everything I had learned about business, marketing, and my own capability. But first, I had to navigate the challenges of rapid growth, while maintaining the quality and authenticity that had made my initial success possible. This balancing act would prove more difficult than anything I had encountered during my startup phase, but it would also prepare me for the ultimate validation of my business philosophy and personal capability. The turning point came in early spring when I received a phone call that would fundamentally change the trajectory of my business and my relationship with my family. Jennifer Williams from the California Women's Leadership Foundation was on the line, explaining that they had been following my work through several referrals and wanted to discuss a potential consulting contract that would be unlike anything I had handled before. The foundation was preparing to launch a statewide initiative supporting women entrepreneurs who had experienced various forms of trauma or systemic barriers to business ownership. They needed a marketing consultant who could help them reach women who might be hesitant to engage with traditional business support services, particularly those who had experienced domestic violence, sexual assault, or economic abuse that had destroyed their credit and professional network. "We've heard about your trauma-informed approach to marketing," Dr. Williams explained during our initial phone conversation, "and we believe your methodology could be crucial for reaching the women who need our services most. Many of them have been let down by systems that promised help, but delivered judgment or inadequate support. We need someone who understands how to communicate safety, authenticity, and genuine opportunity without triggering defensive responses." The scope of the project was intimidating. The foundation wanted to launch a comprehensive campaign that would reach women across California's diverse communities, from urban centers to rural agricultural areas, from affluent suburbs to economically disadvantaged neighborhoods. They needed materials in multiple languages, culturally sensitive messaging that would resonate with different ethnic communities, and distribution strategies that could reach women who might not have traditional internet access or social media presence. More challenging was the timeline. The foundation had received a significant federal grant that required them to launch their initiative within 6 months, which meant developing and implementing a complete marketing strategy faster than I had ever attempted. The contract value was more than I had earned in my entire first year of business, but accepting it would require me to expand my operations dramatically and take on responsibilities that pushed far beyond my comfort zone. The decision to accept the contract kept me awake for 3 nights straight, weighing the potential for transformative growth against the very real possibility of catastrophic failure. If I succeeded, the project would establish my agency as a legitimate player in the social impact marketing space and provide the credibility and resources necessary for sustainable expansion. If I failed, particularly with such a high-profile client and important cause, the damage to my reputation could be devastating enough to destroy everything I had built. I called my mentor Sarah Rodriguez, a successful entrepreneur who had built and sold a digital marketing agency in San Francisco before moving to Sacramento to teach at UC Davis. Sarah had been informally advising me since my first year in business, offering guidance on everything from client relations to financial planning. Her perspective was always practical and honest, which made her the perfect person to help me evaluate this opportunity. "Sophia, you're describing exactly the kind of project that can make or break a growing consultancy," Sarah said after I explained the foundation contract details. "The scope is enormous, the timeline is aggressive, and the stakes are incredibly high. But it's also the kind of opportunity that only comes along once in a career. If you can pull this off, you'll have proven that your approach works at scale and under pressure." Sarah helped me develop a realistic assessment of what would be required to execute the project successfully. I would need to hire additional team members immediately, invest in professional project management software and systems, establish relationships with freelance specialists for translation and cultural consultation, and develop quality control processes that could ensure consistency across a much larger body of work than I had ever managed. the financial implications were equally complex. The foundation was offering a substantial upfront payment, but the bulk of the contract value would be paid upon successful completion of deliverables. This meant I would need to invest heavily in team and infrastructure, while waiting months for the majority of my compensation. If the project failed or was significantly delayed, I could find myself in serious financial trouble despite having the largest contract of my career. After extensive planning and financial modeling, I decided to accept the contract with one significant modification. I requested permission to bring in a strategic partner who could provide additional expertise and resources, while sharing both the risk and potential rewards of the project. This partnership approach would allow me to take on the contract without risking my entire business on a single project, while also giving me access to capabilities I couldn't develop quickly enough on my own. The partner I had in mind was Christina Valdez, who owned a small but highly regarded public relations firm that specialized in social justice campaigns and nonprofit communication. Christina and I had collaborated informally on several smaller projects, and I knew her approach to authentic communication aligned perfectly with my trauma-informed marketing philosophy. More importantly, she had experience managing large-scale campaigns and established relationships with media outlets and community organizations throughout California. Christina was immediately interested in the collaboration, recognizing that the foundation project represented exactly the kind of meaningful work she had built her business to support. Together, we developed a comprehensive proposal that combined my expertise in authentic audience engagement with her experience in public relations and community outreach. The foundation was enthusiastic about our partnership approach, particularly because it demonstrated our commitment to delivering results rather than simply maximizing our individual profits. The next 4 months represented the most intense period of professional growth I had ever experienced. Working with Christina, I hired 3 full-time team members and established relationships with more than a dozen freelance specialists who could provide translation services, cultural consultation, graphic design, and video production. We rented office space in downtown Sacramento, invested in professional project management and collaboration software, and established quality control processes that could ensure consistency across hundreds of individual deliverables. Managing this expanded operation required me to develop skills I had never needed during my startup phase. I had to learn how to delegate effectively while maintaining quality standards, how to coordinate complex timelines across multiple team members, and how to manage client communications and expectations for a project with constantly evolving requirements. Most challenging was learning how to make strategic decisions quickly and confidently, without the luxury of extensive research and deliberation that had characterized my approach to smaller projects. The campaign itself was incredibly complex, requiring us to develop messaging strategies that could reach women across vastly different cultural, economic, and geographic contexts, while maintaining authenticity and sensitivity to trauma responses. We created materials in 7 languages, developed distribution strategies for more than 50 different community organizations, and established partnerships with everyone from domestic violence shelters to immigrant service organizations to rural healthcare clinics. One of our most successful innovations was the development of what we called safety-coded messaging that could communicate the availability of business support services without explicitly mentioning topics that might be dangerous for women in abusive relationships to research. We created materials that appeared to be general small business resources, but contained carefully embedded information about trauma-informed services and safety planning for entrepreneurs facing various forms of domestic or economic abuse. The impact of this approach became clear through the foundation's intake data, which showed that women were accessing services at rates nearly 3 times higher than previous campaigns had achieved. More importantly, follow-up surveys indicated that participants felt safe and supported throughout their initial contact process, which was crucial for building the trust necessary for effective service delivery. Throughout this intensive period, my family's perception of my business began to shift dramatically. My parents witnessed the transformation of my operation from a garage-based startup to a professional agency managing a 6-figure contract with statewide impact. They saw me hiring employees, leasing office space, and speaking at conferences about marketing ethics and trauma-informed business practices. The pride in their voices when they talked about my work was something I had never experienced before. But Marcus remained skeptical, even as the evidence of my success became increasingly difficult to dismiss. During a family barbecue in late summer, while I was describing some of the campaign's early results, Marcus interrupted with his familiar tone of condescending concern. "I'm glad you're having success with this nonprofit work," he said, emphasizing the word nonprofit as if it somehow diminished the legitimacy of my achievements. "But you need to understand that social impact marketing is a very specialized. It doesn't translate to real business success in competitive markets where companies need to generate actual profits and sustainable growth." The dismissiveness in his voice was particularly galling because I had just finished explaining how our campaign had exceeded all performance metrics and was being used as a model for similar initiatives in other states. But Marcus seemed incapable of acknowledging that my approach to marketing might have value beyond what he considered charitable work. "Real marketing is about driving revenue and market share in competitive environments," Marcus continued, launching into a lecture about the sophisticated strategies used by Harrison and Associates to help their corporate clients dominate their industry. "Emotional connection and community building are nice supplementary tactics, but they can't replace data-driven optimization and strategic market positioning when you're competing for actual business results." I listened to his monologue with growing frustration, not just because of his continuing refusal to acknowledge my achievements, but because his perspective revealed how limited his understanding of modern marketing had become. The corporate environment at Harrison and Associates had apparently insulated him from the broader changes in how consumers were making purchasing decisions and how successful businesses were building sustainable competitive advantage. The conversation was interrupted by our cousin Elena, who had been following my work through social media and had some pointed questions for Marcus about his marketing philosophy. Elena worked as a brand manager for a sustainable clothing company in Portland, and she had been experimenting with some of the authentic engagement strategies I had written about in industry publications. "Marcus, I'm curious about something," Elena said with a diplomatic smile that didn't quite hide her challenging intent. "The approaches Sofia is describing sound very similar to what we're seeing from the most successful brands in our industry. Companies that focus on genuine community building and authentic storytelling are consistently outperforming competitors who rely on traditional advertising and price-based competition. Are you seeing different trends in your corporate clients?" Marcus's response revealed the insularity of his professional environment. He explained that Harrison and Associates worked primarily with established corporations in traditional industries like finance, manufacturing, and real estate, where marketing strategies focused on demonstrating credibility, competitive advantages, and professional expertise. The approaches I was developing might work for lifestyle brands and social enterprises, but they weren't applicable to serious business-to-business marketing where decision-makers care about measurable results rather than emotional appeal. Elena's follow-up questions became increasingly pointed as she challenged Marcus's assumptions about the effectiveness of traditional marketing approaches. She shared metrics from her own company showing how authentic storytelling and community engagement were driving both customer acquisition and retention at levels that exceeded their previous advertising-based strategy. She mentioned several high-profile brands that had built billion-dollar valuations, specifically by rejecting traditional marketing in favor of approaches that prioritized authenticity and customer relationship building. The debate that followed was enlightening in ways that went far beyond family dynamics. Marcus's responses revealed that his professional environment had become an echo chamber where traditional marketing approaches were accepted as universal truths, rather than strategies that might need to evolve with changing consumer preferences and market conditions. He seemed genuinely surprised by Elena's examples of successful companies that had built competitive advantages through the kinds of relationship-focused marketing I was advocating. More telling was Marcus's inability to provide concrete examples of Harrison and Associates' recent campaign successes. When pressed for details about client results and innovative strategies, his responses became vague and focused on industry awards and client retention, rather than measurable business outcomes. It became apparent that his confidence in traditional marketing superiority was based more on theoretical beliefs than empirical evidence. The conversation ended without resolution, but it planted seeds of doubt that would influence my thinking about the marketing industry and my place within it. If established agencies like Harrison and Associates were struggling to deliver innovative results for their clients, while smaller firms like mine were achieving breakthrough success through alternative approaches. Perhaps the marketing landscape was shifting more dramatically than industry leaders recognized. This realization became more significant a few weeks later when I received an unexpected invitation to speak at the Pacific Northwest Marketing Summit, one of the region's most prestigious industry conferences. Rebecca Martinez, a marketing professor at the University of Washington, who had been following my work through academic publications and industry case studies, we're seeing increasing interest in trauma-informed and authenticity-focused marketing approaches. Martinez explained during our initial conversation, but most of the discussion remains theoretical. You're one of the few practitioners who can speak about these methods from the perspective of measurable business results and scalable implementation. The speaking opportunity represented a significant step up in professional recognition and credibility. The conference typically featured senior executives from major agencies and corporations, along with leading academic researchers and industry thought leaders. Being invited to present alongside such established professionals was validation that my work was being taken seriously within the broader marketing community. Preparing for the presentation required me to synthesize everything I had learned about authentic marketing into a coherent framework that could be understood and applied by marketing professionals from various backgrounds and industries. I spent weeks reviewing my case studies, analyzing the common elements that had driven success across different client projects, and developing practical recommendations that could be implemented by other marketing practitioners. The presentation itself was one of the most nerve-wracking professional experiences of my life, but also one of the most rewarding. Speaking to an audience of several hundred marketing professionals about trauma-informed business practices and authentic community engagement felt like a culmination of everything I had been working toward since starting my business. The response exceeded my expectations in every way. During the question and answer session, audience members shared examples of how traditional marketing approaches were failing their organizations and expressed genuine interest in learning more about alternative strategies. Several attendees mentioned that they had been searching for exactly the kinds of frameworks I was presenting, having recognized that their current approaches were becoming less effective but unsure how to evolve their practices. More significantly, the presentation led to a series of consulting inquiries from organizations that represented a completely different scale and scope than my previous client. Instead of small businesses and nonprofits seeking help with basic marketing challenges, I was hearing from mid-sized companies, and even some larger corporations, that wanted to explore how authentic engagement strategies could be applied to their more complex marketing needs. One of the most intriguing inquiries came from Patricia Winters, the chief marketing officer of a regional healthcare system that was struggling to build trust with communities that had been historically underserved or mistreated by medical institutions. She explained that their traditional healthcare marketing approaches were failing to reach the populations that most needed their services, particularly communities of color and low-income families who had legitimate reasons to distrust healthcare institutions. We've tried every conventional marketing strategy, Patricia explained during our initial consultation, but we keep hitting the same barriers. Our messaging feels institutional and impersonal, our outreach efforts are perceived as self-serving, and our campaign results show that we're primarily reaching people who already have access to healthcare, rather than the communities we're trying to serve. The healthcare system's challenge was exactly the kind of complex, high-stakes marketing problem that could demonstrate whether my approach could scale beyond small business applications. Healthcare marketing involved regulatory compliance requirements, multiple stakeholder groups with conflicting interests, and life-or-death implications that made authenticity and trust absolutely crucial for success. Working with Patricia's team, I developed a comprehensive strategy that prioritized community partnership and genuine service over promotional messaging and brand awareness. Instead of advertising their medical services directly, we created programs that addressed broader community health needs, from nutrition education to mental health support to advocacy for healthcare policy changes that would benefit underserved populations. The campaign included partnerships with community organizations that had already established trust within target populations, educational content that provided genuine value regardless of whether people used the healthcare system's services, and patient storytelling that highlighted successful care experiences while acknowledging historical failures and systemic barriers that had damaged trust between healthcare institutions and minority communities. The results were transformative, not just for the healthcare system's marketing metrics, but for their actual patient outcomes and community relationships. Emergency department visits from target communities increased by 40%, but more importantly, preventive care utilization increased by over 60%, indicating that people were accessing healthcare services earlier and more appropriately. Patient satisfaction scores improved dramatically, and community health indicators showed measurable improvements in several target neighborhoods. The healthcare system case study became a powerful demonstration of how authentic marketing approaches could drive meaningful business results in complex, regulated industries. The success attracted attention from other healthcare organizations, but also from companies in industries like financial services, education, and technology that faced similar challenges in building trust with skeptical or historically marginalized audiences. As word spread about my work with larger organizations, the nature of my business began to change in ways that required me to reconsider my long-term strategy and goal. I was receiving inquiries from potential clients whose projects would require teams of specialists, multi-month timelines, and sophisticated project management capabilities that went far beyond what I had originally envisioned for my consulting practice. The question I faced was whether to pursue this growth trajectory, which would require significant investment in infrastructure and personnel, or to maintain my current scale and focus on smaller projects that aligned more closely with my original vision of helping small businesses and nonprofits build authentic community connections. The decision became more complex when Christina and I received an inquiry that would test everything we had learned about scaling authentic marketing approach. A venture capital firm in San Francisco was looking for marketing consultants who could help their portfolio companies build genuine community engagement and customer loyalty, rather than relying solely on aggressive customer acquisition and retention tactics that were becoming less effective and more expensive. The firm's managing partner, David Chen, explained that they were seeing concerning trends across their investments, where companies were spending increasing amounts on traditional marketing and customer acquisition, while seeing diminishing returns and declining customer lifetime value. They wanted to explore whether alternative approaches might help their portfolio companies build more sustainable competitive advantage. We're particularly interested in working with consultants who can help our companies build authentic relationships with their customers, David explained during our initial video conference. Traditional growth hacking and performance marketing are becoming less effective, and we're looking for strategies that can drive sustainable growth through genuine value creation, rather than sophisticated manipulation techniques. The scope of the potential engagement was enormous. The firm's portfolio included more than 30 companies across various industries, from software startups to consumer goods brands to service business. Each company would require customized strategies that could integrate authentic marketing approaches with their existing business models and growth objectives. More intriguingly, the firm was proposing a partnership structure that would give Christina and me equity stakes in the companies we worked with, rather than just consulting fees. This meant our compensation would be directly tied to the long-term success of our marketing strategies, creating powerful incentives for developing approaches that drove sustainable business results, rather than just short-term campaign metrics. The opportunity represented everything I had been working towards since starting my business. Instead of constantly having to prove the value of authentic marketing approaches to skeptical clients, I would be working with organizations that were actively seeking alternatives to traditional marketing and were willing to invest significant resources in developing new strategies. But accepting the engagement would require Christina and me to expand our operations dramatically, potentially hiring dozens of team members and establishing offices in multiple cities to serve clients across the portfolio. It would mean transitioning from boutique consultants to agency owners, with all the management and administrative responsibilities that such growth would entail. The decision deadline was approaching just as I received a piece of news that would completely recontextualize my choices about business growth and professional direction. Marcus called me on a Tuesday evening, his voice carrying an unusual combination of excitement and anxiety that immediately caught my attention. "Sophia, I need to tell you something that's going to affect our whole family," he began, his typically confident tone replaced by something that sounded almost nervous. "There are some major changes happening at Harrison and Associates, and they're going to impact my career in ways I didn't see coming." What Marcus told me next would set in motion a chain of events that would fundamentally alter not only my business trajectory, but also my relationship with my brother and my understanding of success in the marketing industry. The corporate environment that had shaped his worldview and professional identity was about to undergo changes that would challenge everything he believed about business, marketing, and his own capability. As I listened to Marcus describe the upheaval at Harrison and Associates, I realized that the choice between scaling my business and maintaining its current focus was about to become much more significant than a simple business decision. The path I chose would determine not only my professional future, but also whether I would be in a position to help my family navigate the challenges that were about to reshape all of our lives. Marcus's voice cracked slightly as he delivered the news that would change everything between us. "Harrison and Associates is being acquired," he said, the words coming out in a rush as if saying them quickly would somehow minimize their impact. "The ownership announced it yesterday. A private equity firm called Meridian Capital has been buying up mid-sized marketing agencies across the West Coast, and we're their latest target." The silence that followed his announcement stretched long enough for me to process not just the information, but the undertone of genuine fear in my brother's voice. For the first time since we were children, Marcus sounded vulnerable and uncertain, stripped of the professional confidence that had defined his identity for so many years. "They're calling it a strategic consolidation," Marcus continued, his marketing training evident even in his personal crisis as he unconsciously adopted corporate euphemisms to describe what was clearly a traumatic professional upheaval. "Meridian wants to create a regional powerhouse by combining our client relationships with their operational efficiency and technology platforms." I waited for him to explain what this meant for his career, but Marcus seemed reluctant to voice the implications directly. Finally, he admitted what I had already guessed from his tone. "They're implementing what they call organizational optimization, which means significant staff reductions and restructuring of client management responsibility. My position as senior account director is being eliminated, along with about 40% of our current team." The irony of the situation was staggering. Marcus, who had spent years dismissing my entrepreneurial journey as unsustainable and unprofessional, was now facing the elimination of the corporate position that had been the foundation of his professional identity and financial security. The stable, prestigious career path he had chosen over entrepreneurial risk-taking was proving to be far more precarious than my supposedly unstable consulting business. But what struck me most was not the vindication I might have expected to feel, but genuine concern for my brother's well-being and future prospects. Despite years of condescending comments and professional dismissal, Marcus was still my family, and seeing him genuinely frightened about his career was painful in ways I hadn't anticipated. "What are your options?" I asked, setting aside the complicated history of our professional relationship to focus on practical support. "Are they offering severance packages, transition assistance, opportunities to interview for positions in the consolidated organization?" Marcus's response revealed just how little control he had over his supposedly secure career trajectory. Meridian was offering minimal severance packages to departing employees, but these came with non-compete clauses that would prevent him from working for competing agencies in the region for 18 months. The positions that remained available after the consolidation were primarily junior roles with significantly reduced compensation and responsibilities. "I've been looking at opportunities with other agencies," Marcus said, "but the market is incredibly competitive right now. Meridian isn't the only private equity firm consolidating the industry, so there are a lot of experienced marketing professionals competing for a shrinking number of positions. Most of the openings I've found would represent significant steps backward in terms of responsibility and compensation." As Marcus described his job search challenges, I began to understand how dramatically the marketing industry had changed during the years when I was building my business from the ground up. The consolidation trend he was experiencing wasn't limited to his particular agency, but represented a broader transformation that was eliminating many of the stable, well-paying positions that had attracted professionals like Marcus to corporate marketing careers. More significantly, the approaches and skills that had made Marcus successful at Harrison & Associates weren't necessarily transferable to other opportunities in the evolving industry. His expertise was primarily in traditional B2B marketing strategies that emphasized professional credibility and established relationship management. But many potential employers were looking for professionals with experience in digital marketing, social media engagement, and the kinds of authentic community building that I had been developing through my consulting work. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with Marcus describing his professional situation in detail that revealed both his genuine confusion about how to navigate this crisis and his growing recognition that the marketing industry had evolved in ways he hadn't fully understood. For the first time in our adult relationship, he was asking for my perspective rather than offering unsolicited advice about my career choices. "Sophia, I know I haven't always been supportive of your business approach," Marcus said, his voice carrying a humility I had never heard before. "But I'm starting to think that you understood something about the industry's direction that I missed. The clients who are thriving in this new environment seem to be the ones who prioritize authentic engagement and community building rather than traditional advertising and promotional strategy." The admission was significant not just because it represented the first time Marcus had acknowledged the value of my work, but because it suggested that he was beginning to question some of the fundamental assumptions that had guided his career decision. The corporate environment that had shaped his professional worldview was disappearing, and he was struggling to adapt to industry changes that I had been navigating successfully for years. Our conversation was interrupted by a call from Christina, who had urgent news about the venture capital firm opportunity that would completely reframe both my business prospects and my ability to help Marcus through his career transition. "Sophia, you need to hear this," Christina said, her voice bubbling with excitement that was immediately infectious. "David Chen just called with an update about the portfolio engagement that changes everything about the scope and timeline." What Christina told me next exceeded my most optimistic projections for how our business could evolve. Instead of working with the venture capital firm's portfolio companies as external consultants, Meridian Capital had proposed acquiring our agency as part of their strategy for transforming the marketing approaches across their investment. They wanted to integrate authentic marketing methodologies directly into their portfolio companies' operations, with Christina and me leading the initiative as senior executives in their organization. The acquisition proposal included immediate equity stakes in multiple portfolio companies, substantial increases in compensation, and most significantly the resources and authority to implement authentic marketing strategies at scale across dozens of organizations. It represented the kind of professional opportunity that could transform Christina and me from boutique consultants to industry leaders with the power to influence marketing practices across an entire investment portfolio. But the most shocking aspect of Christina's news was the identity of the private equity firm making the acquisition offer. Meridian Capital was the same company that was acquiring Harrison & Associates and eliminating Marcus's position. The firm's strategy involved not just consolidating traditional marketing agencies, but replacing their conventional approaches with the innovative methodologies that Christina and I had been developing through our consulting work. The implications were staggering. If I accepted Meridian's acquisition offer, I would become a senior executive in the organization that was dismantling Marcus's career and transforming the industry he had spent years trying to master. More than professional vindication, it would represent a complete reversal of our family's assumptions about business success and career stability. Christina was barely containing her excitement as she described the details of Meridian's offer. "They want us to move to San Francisco and establish a new division focused on authentic marketing transformation. We'd have a team of 50 professionals, equity stakes in 30 portfolio companies, and budgets that exceed anything we've ever imagined. This is the opportunity to prove that our approach can work at massive scale while building something that could influence the entire marketing industry." The decision deadline was 3 weeks away, but I knew that accepting the offer would require me to make choices that went far beyond business strategy. Moving to San Francisco would mean leaving Sacramento, the community I had built my business to serve, and the personal relationships that had sustained me through the challenges of entrepreneurship. It would mean transforming from a local consultant focused on helping small businesses and nonprofits to a corporate executive responsible for driving results across multiple industries and geographic markets. More personally, it would mean accepting a position of authority over the professional environment that had shaped Marcus's career while he was struggling to find his place in the industry's transformation. The power dynamics of our relationship would be completely reversed, with me holding the kind of corporate position he had always assumed would remain beyond my capability. But as I considered the magnitude of the opportunity, I realized that accepting Meridian's offer might also create possibilities for helping Marcus navigate his career transition in ways that could benefit both of us. If I had influence over the organization's hiring and strategic direction, I might be able to create opportunities for Marcus to develop the skills and experience necessary for success in the evolving marketing industry. The conversation with Christina ended with plans to meet the following day to develop our response strategy for Meridian's acquisition offer. But first, I needed to have another conversation with Marcus that would fundamentally alter our relationship and potentially determine the trajectory of both our careers. I called Marcus that evening, ostensibly to follow up on our earlier conversation about his job search, but actually to explore whether he might be interested in a collaboration that could address both his immediate career needs and my long-term business objective. The conversation began with my sharing some general observations about industry trends and potential opportunities for marketing professionals willing to develop new skills and approach. Marcus, I've been thinking about our conversation today, and I wonder if you'd be interested in exploring some collaborative opportunities, I said, choosing my words carefully to avoid triggering his defensive responses to anything that might sound like charity or condescension. I'm starting to receive consulting inquiries that require expertise in traditional B2B marketing combined with authentic engagement strategies. There might be ways for us to work together that could benefit both of our career objectives. Marcus's initial response was cautious but interested. He acknowledged that his job search was proving more challenging than expected, and that he was beginning to recognize the need to develop new skills and approaches that aligned with evolving industry standards. The possibility of learning authentic marketing methodologies, while applying his existing expertise to larger consulting projects, represented exactly the kind of professional development opportunity he needed. Over the next several days, Marcus and I had a series of conversations that gradually evolved from cautious exploration to genuine collaboration planning. I shared details about the types of projects I was handling, the methodologies I had developed, and the business opportunities that were emerging from my growing reputation in the authentic marketing space. Marcus contributed insights about corporate client needs, strategic planning processes, and operational systems that could help scale my consulting approach to larger organizations. The breakthrough moment came when Marcus suggested that our collaboration could involve him taking responsibility for the business development and client management aspects of larger projects, while I focused on strategy development and creative implementation. This division of responsibilities would allow each of us to contribute our strongest capabilities, while learning from each other's expertise and experience. I think I've been wrong about the sustainability of your approach, Marcus admitted during one of our planning conversations. The corporate environment taught me to prioritize efficiency and scalability over authenticity and relationship building. But I'm seeing evidence that authentic engagement strategies are actually more scalable in the long term because they create stronger customer loyalty and word-of-mouth referral. The admission represented a fundamental shift in Marcus's understanding of business success and marketing effectiveness. For the first time in our adult relationship, he was acknowledging that my supposedly amateur approach to business might actually be more sophisticated and sustainable than the corporate strategies he had always considered superior. Our collaboration planning was proceeding smoothly when I received the phone call that would transform everything about my decision-making process and my relationship with Mark. David Chen from Meridian Capital was calling with an update about their acquisition timeline that would require me to make decisions much faster than I had anticipated. Sofia, I need to share some information that's going to affect your decision about joining Meridian, David said, his voice carrying an urgency that immediately captured my attention. We've accelerated our timeline for integrating authentic marketing approaches across our portfolio companies, which means we need your answer about the acquisition offer within 48 hours. The reason for the acceleration was both shocking and perfectly logical. Meridian had discovered that several of their portfolio companies were experiencing declining customer acquisition efficiency and increasing churn rates, despite substantial investments in traditional marketing and advertising. The approaches that had driven their initial growth were becoming less effective, and the companies needed alternative strategies that could rebuild customer engagement and loyalty. More significantly, Meridian's research had identified my consulting work as representing exactly the methodologies their portfolio companies needed to regain competitive advantages in increasingly crowded markets. They had analyzed the results I had achieved with clients like the healthcare system and the Women's Leadership Foundation, and they were convinced that scaling these approaches across their investments could drive substantial improvements in both customer acquisition and retention metrics. We want you to take over marketing strategy for our entire West Coast portfolio, David explained. This would include overseeing the transformation of marketing approaches at Harrison & Associates and 14 other acquired agencies, plus direct strategy responsibility for 37 portfolio companies across various industries. The scope of the opportunity was breathtaking. Instead of working with individual clients to implement authentic marketing strategies, I would have the authority and resources to transform marketing practices across dozens of organizations simultaneously. The potential impact on both business results and industry standards could be enormous, establishing authentic engagement as a mainstream marketing approach rather than a specialized niche. But David's next revelation completely transformed my understanding of the opportunity and its implications for my relationship with Marcus. Sofia, there's something else you should know about this position. One of your primary responsibilities would be overseeing the integration and transformation of Harrison & Associates, which means you would be directly supervising the remaining staff and determining the strategic direction for Marcus's former employer. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. The brother who had spent years dismissing my business capabilities as amateur and unsustainable would be working in an organization where I held executive authority over his former colleagues and the marketing strategies he had once considered superior to my approach. The reversal of professional roles was so complete that it seemed like fictional justice rather than actual business opportunity. David continued with details that made the situation even more surreal. We've been analyzing Harrison & Associates' client retention and performance metrics, and we've identified significant opportunities for improvement through the implementation of authentic engagement strategy. The clients who have remained with the agency during the acquisition transition are specifically requesting more relationship-focused approaches to marketing, which aligns perfectly with your expertise. As David described Meridian's plans for transforming Harrison & Associates, I realized that accepting their acquisition offer would put me in a position to implement exactly the kinds of marketing approaches that Marcus had dismissed as ineffective for corporate clients. I would have the opportunity to prove that authentic engagement strategies could drive superior results, even in the traditional B2B environment, where Marcus had built his career. The decision I faced was no longer just about my business growth and professional development. It was about whether I was willing to accept a position that would fundamentally alter my relationship with Marcus, while potentially providing him with opportunities to rebuild his career under my leadership. The power dynamics of our sibling relationship would be completely transformed, with implications that extended far beyond professional success. I requested a 24-hour extension to consider Meridian's offer, explaining that I needed time to discuss the opportunity with my family and evaluate how the position would affect my personal relationships and long-term objectives. David agreed to the extension but emphasized that the offer was time-sensitive due to their aggressive timeline for portfolio integration. That evening I sat down with Marcus to explain the Meridian opportunity and its implications for both of our careers. The conversation was one of the most difficult and important we had ever had, requiring both of us to confront our assumptions about success, family relationships, and professional hierarchy. Marcus, I need to tell you about an opportunity that could affect both of our futures, I began, choosing my words carefully to prepare him for information that I knew would be shocking and potentially humiliating. The private equity firm that's acquiring Harrison & Associates has offered to acquire my consulting business and put me in charge of marketing transformation across their entire portfolio. Marcus's initial response was confusion rather than the defensive anger I had expected. He struggled to understand how the company that was eliminating his position could simultaneously be offering me executive authority over their marketing strategies. The cognitive dissonance was clearly difficult for him to process. As I explained the details of Meridian's offer and their plans for transforming Harrison and Associates through authentic marketing implementation, Marcus's expression shifted from confusion to recognition to something that looked almost like relief. Instead of viewing my opportunity as a personal betrayal or professional humiliation, he seemed to understand it as validation of insights he had been developing about industry changes and his own career limitations. "This makes perfect sense," Marcus said after I finished explaining the situation. "I've been wondering why traditional marketing approaches were becoming less effective for our clients, and I've been seeing evidence that the most successful campaigns were the ones that prioritized relationship building over direct sales messaging. You understood these trends years before I did." The conversation that followed was transformative for our relationship in ways that went far beyond professional collaboration. For the first time in our adult lives, Marcus and I were able to discuss our respective strengths and limitations with honesty and mutual respect, rather than competition and defensiveness. Marcus acknowledged that his corporate training had given him valuable skills in project management, client relations, and strategic planning, but had also created blind spots about emerging marketing trends and consumer behavior change. He recognized that my entrepreneurial experience had forced me to develop innovative approaches and authentic engagement strategies that were becoming increasingly valuable in the evolving industry. More importantly, Marcus expressed genuine enthusiasm about the possibility of working together to implement authentic marketing strategies at Harrison and Associates and other Meridian portfolio companies. Instead of viewing my executive position as a threat to his professional dignity, he saw it as an opportunity to learn new approaches while contributing his existing expertise to larger-scale projects. "Sophia, I think this could be the perfect collaboration," Marcus said with more genuine excitement than I had heard in his voice for months. "You have the strategic vision and innovative methodologies that these companies need, and I have the operational experience and client relationship skills that could help implement your approaches at corporate scale." The following morning, I called David Chen to accept Meridian's acquisition offer with one significant modification. I requested permission to hire Marcus as my deputy director for client relationship management and operational integration, explaining that his expertise in traditional corporate marketing would be valuable for managing the transition process at acquired agencies. David's response exceeded my expectations. "That's exactly the kind of strategic thinking we want to see from our executive team." Having someone with Marcus's background and relationships could accelerate our integration timeline and help maintain client confidence during the transformation process. 3 weeks later, I walked into the downtown San Francisco office building that housed Meridian Capital's headquarters, wearing my most professional business suit and carrying a briefcase that contained strategic plans for transforming marketing approaches across 37 portfolio companies. The irony of the moment wasn't lost on me as I remembered Marcus's condescending comments about my garage-based startup and his predictions about my inevitable business failure. But the most satisfying moment came when I arrived at the Harrison and Associates office for my first meeting as the new director of marketing transformation. Marcus was waiting in the conference room along with the remaining staff members who had survived the acquisition, all of them clearly nervous about meeting their new supervisor and learning about the strategic changes that would determine their professional future. The silence in the room as I introduced myself and began explaining Meridian's vision for authentic marketing transformation was profound. Several staff members who had witnessed Marcus's dismissive comments about my consulting work were visibly struggling to process the reversal of our professional position. But Marcus himself seemed genuinely excited about the collaboration opportunities and eager to begin implementing the new approaches. "I want everyone to understand that this transformation is about evolution, not elimination," I explained to the assembled team. "We're going to build on the client relationships and operational expertise that Harrison and Associates has developed while implementing marketing strategies that align with changing consumer expectations and industry trends." Over the following months, the transformation of Harrison and Associates became a model for authentic marketing implementation that exceeded even Meridian's ambitious expectations. Client retention rates improved dramatically as we replaced generic promotional messaging with personalized relationship-building strategies. New client acquisition accelerated as word spread about our innovative approaches and superior results. Most importantly, staff satisfaction and engagement increased as team members discovered the professional fulfillment that came from building genuine connections with clients rather than simply executing standardized marketing campaigns. Marcus thrived in his new role as deputy director, applying his project management and client relationship skills to support the implementation of authentic marketing strategies across multiple accounts. The collaboration that had begun as a family reconciliation evolved into a genuine professional partnership that leveraged both of our strengths while addressing our respective limitations. The success of our work at Harrison & Associates attracted attention throughout Meridian's portfolio and the broader marketing industry. Within 6 months, we were invited to speak at industry conferences about authentic marketing transformation and sustainable business growth. The garage-based startup that Marcus had once mocked as unsustainable had evolved into an industry-leading approach that was being studied and implemented by marketing professionals across the country. But perhaps the most meaningful outcome was the transformation of my relationship with Marcus and our family's understanding of success and professional achievement. Instead of competing over whose approach to business was superior, Marcus and I had learned to collaborate by combining our different strengths and perspectives. Our parents watched with pride as their children built a successful business partnership based on mutual respect and shared values rather than sibling rivalry and professional jealousy. The garage where I had started my consulting business became a symbol of entrepreneurial determination rather than amateur inadequacy. During family gatherings, Marcus would often tell stories about visiting my makeshift office and failing to recognize the potential of what I was building. These stories weren't told with embarrassment, but with genuine admiration for my persistence and vision during the early stages of business development. The ultimate vindication came during our second year at Meridian, when our authentic marketing division was recognized as the most successful transformation initiative in the company's history. The portfolio companies we worked with consistently outperformed their competitors in customer acquisition, retention, and lifetime value metrics. More importantly, these companies were building sustainable competitive advantages based on authentic customer relationships rather than temporary marketing tactics. As I sat in my San Francisco office, reviewing the quarterly results that showed double-digit growth across our entire portfolio, I reflected on the journey that had brought me from that cramped garage to executive leadership in one of the region's most successful marketing organizations. The brother who had once dismissed my business dreams as unrealistic was now my trusted collaborator and deputy, applying his corporate expertise to support the implementation of strategies that had emerged from my entrepreneurial experimentation. The transformation was complete, but more than professional vindication, it represented proof that success could be built through authenticity, relationship building, and genuine value creation, rather than manipulation, competition, and zero-sum thinking. The marketing industry was evolving toward approaches that prioritized human connection over algorithmic optimization. And Marcus and I had positioned ourselves at the forefront of that transformation by learning to combine our different strengths rather than competing over whose perspective was superior. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.